My name is Julian Cross. I'm 41 years old, and until 2 months ago, I was the man holding our family business together from the inside out. For 22 years, I gave my life to Cross and Drake Enterprises. I started as a floor assistant straight out of college and rose through every rank without ever asking for shortcuts. I learned every piece of that company: operations, finances, logistics, people. I made the hard calls, stayed late when others clocked out, and cleaned up the messes no one else wanted to touch. And I did it for family, for loyalty, for legacy. But blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Sometimes it hides a blade behind a smile. The day my younger brother Caleb became CEO, I felt the change in the air the moment I stepped into the office. It was a grey Tuesday morning, cloudy, humid, like the world was holding its breath. I arrived early, just like I always had. Some habits don't break easily, especially when you believe in duty. Everyone was already talking about him. Caleb, the golden boy, 5 years younger than me, Ivy League education, perfect teeth, expensive watch. He was everything a board of aging executives wanted to parade in front of shareholders. Charismatic, ambitious, smooth. But beneath the polish, Caleb had always been calculating. I saw it when we were kids. The way he lied to our parents without flinching. How he'd smile while setting up someone else to take the fall. As teenagers, he made it a game, turning charm into power. I never called him out. I thought he'd grow out of it. I thought maybe, somewhere deep down, he'd remember what family actually meant. That morning, he walked into the boardroom, 10 minutes late, like he was stepping onto a stage. His suit was perfectly tailored, his cologne sharp. He greeted everyone like old friends, made jokes, thanked the board for their trust, praised our father's legacy. Then, with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, he started talking about change, evolution, cutting inefficiencies. He never looked at me once during the speech, not even a glance. When it was over, he asked me to stay back. I already knew what was coming. He waited until the room was empty before he said it. "Jules," he started, using the nickname he hadn't said in years, "you know I love you." I stayed silent. Just waited. This business is heading in a new direction. We need fresh energy, new leadership models. I need a team that reflects that. My chest tightened, but I didn't show it. He folded his hands like he was talking to a stranger. "We're letting you go. Effective immediately." That was it. No discussion, no gratitude, no dignity, just a clean surgical cut. I looked at him for a long second. Not out of shock. I wasn't shocked. Caleb had always played for power. He just never had the throne before. Now that he did, he didn't waste time showing me the door. I stood, straightened my jacket, nodded once, and walked out. He didn't know it then, but that moment didn't break me. It focused me. Out in the lobby, the receptionist avoided my gaze. No one said goodbye. It was like I disappeared the moment Caleb snapped his fingers. But I walked out tall. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was crystal clear. Caleb thought he'd won. He thought that title gave him all the power. He thought because I was out of the building, I was out of the game. But he'd made a critical mistake, one he didn't even realize. He assumed the company ran on strategy and flair, but it ran on relationships, on trust, on history. It ran on me. And most of those long-term clients, they came to Cross and Drake because of me. They stayed because I answered when the deal stalled, because I called when they lost faith, because I solved problems before they even had to ask. Caleb didn't have that. He never did. He also didn't know the deeper truth. Years ago, when our grandfather passed, he left behind a clause buried in the foundation documents, an old-school legacy clause. The eldest son inherits 11% silent ownership on his 40th birthday. Dad never revoked it, which meant I still owned part of the company. Caleb had just fired a legal part owner without a board vote. I went home that night and poured a drink, sat at my desk, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city lights, pulled out the folder I hadn't touched in years, the one I kept locked at the bottom of the drawer just in case. Inside were contracts, names, financial trails, access keys, every weakness in the system, every back door, every secret I'd quietly catalogued over the years, not to use, just to understand the house I helped build. I wasn't planning revenge when I started reading, not yet. But the more I saw, the more I realized Caleb hadn't just stolen my job. He'd broken something sacred, and I don't take betrayal lightly. I'd spent my life building that empire brick by brick. I knew its cracks, I knew its foundations, and I knew exactly where to apply pressure to make it all come crumbling down. Caleb had the title, but I had the leverage. He thought he could cast me out like dead weight. But dead weight doesn't carry a vault of secrets. Dead weight doesn't own 11% of the structure. Dead weight doesn't know how to burn a house from the inside out without ever being seen. He thought I was gone, but I hadn't even started. He took my seat at the table. I still had the keys to the vault. And soon enough, Caleb Cross was going to find out exactly what that meant. 2 days after Caleb fired me, I pulled an old number from my contacts list. It had been almost 6 years since I last spoke to Daniel Reyes. He picked up on the second ring. "Julian," he said, like he'd been expecting me. I didn't need to explain much. Just mentioned Caleb, mentioned the company. Daniel laughed, low and bitter. "Payback?" he asked. "Justice," I replied. Daniel Reyes was once the most loyal guy on our tech team, sharp, quiet, obsessed with security protocols, and building firewalls even we didn't know how to break. I'd hired him straight out of college. Caleb fired him 2 years later for budget efficiency, a line that really meant Daniel was too smart to be manipulated. I gave him a simple task: gain access. Don't touch anything, just watch, just listen. By the end of the week, I had backdoor access to Caleb's inbox, the internal Slack channels, and the company's private drive. I didn't care about gossip. I wanted the pressure points. I wanted the fractures, and I found them. Caleb was doing what Caleb always did, over-promising and covering his tracks later. He was bleeding capital on flashy campaigns that brought in zero returns. He'd signed off on 3 major supplier deals without proper vetting, and worse, he'd silenced a harassment complaint against one of his hand-picked executives by forcing the victim to resign with a hush settlement. He was already running the company into the ground. All I had to do was give gravity a little nudge. But I didn't rush. I waited. Patience is a weapon. I started by making a call to Carter & Wells, one of our largest legacy clients. The account was worth $8.4 million in annual revenue. I'd managed their portfolio personally for 15 years. They trusted me more than anyone in the company. "Julian," Mr. Wells said, "what the hell happened over there?" I gave no details, just that I was no longer with Cross and Drake. He hesitated. "That's a problem. We signed our renewal last month, but Caleb's team hasn't responded in 2 weeks. I smiled. "Would you consider moving your portfolio elsewhere?" I asked. "To where?" "I'm starting something new," I lied. That afternoon, I registered a shell consulting firm under the name Northgate Advisory. Daniel set up the digital infrastructure, email domains, and a public-facing site that looked polished but offered nothing traceable. Within 3 days, I had 3 former Cross and Drake clients asking for contracts, quietly, privately. Caleb didn't notice at first. He was too busy doing press interviews and pretending he knew how to lead. But then the cracks widened. The first leak was small, an anonymous tip sent to a trade journal about Cross and Drake's failing Q1 numbers. The second came a week later. Copies of internal reports showing misallocated funds on a product launch Caleb had championed. No one traced it back to me. I was careful. Every breadcrumb looked like it came from someone inside the company, someone unhappy, someone scared. By week 3, the board was asking questions. I watched Caleb's inbox flood with panic. We need to find the source. This is damaging our brand. You promised us growth, not scandal. And then came the audit. The board hired an independent firm to review financial practices. That's when things really got interesting. Daniel and I made sure they found exactly what they needed. Emails, signatures, overspending, underreporting, all real, all Caleb. I didn't forge a single thing. I didn't have to. I just opened the closet and let the skeletons fall out. But I wasn't done. I reached out to Ava Monroe, a brilliant strategist Caleb had alienated 2 years ago. She left the company after he took credit for her entire department's turnaround plan. She remembered, and she was hungry. I brought her in under Northgate's banner, quietly. No LinkedIn announcements, no press releases. She helped me. A draft of full strategic offering to Cross & Drake's top-tier clients. Better returns, more transparency, and none of the internal chaos. We didn't need to advertise. The clients came to us. Caleb finally noticed something was off when 3 of our biggest legacy accounts terminated within the same 48 hours. He blamed his VP of accounts, then his CMO, then his own assistant. What he never suspected was me. I was the ghost in his walls. Every time he held a board meeting, I knew what he'd say before he said it. Every time he tried to contain the leaks, another one surfaced from a different angle. He tried hiring a security consultant. Daniel rerouted his tracking efforts to a fake server farm we built in Belgium. Caleb was fighting shadows. And shadows always win when you're too blind to look where they come from. By week 6, morale at Cross & Drake was in freefall. Caleb started holding emergency calls on Sunday nights. He accused his leadership team of disloyalty. He launched investigations. People began quitting, not because of me, but because of him. Because he didn't know how to lead. He only knew how to wear the crown. And now, the crown was burning. I watched from my penthouse window the night I saw the news alert. Cross & Drake stock dips 23% amidst internal scandal and leadership crisis. Caleb hadn't just lost control, he was starting to lose his mind. And I was just getting started. He still had no idea who was behind it. No idea that the man he'd cast out still owned a piece of his throne. Still pulled the strings. Still had the loyalty of the people who really mattered. I poured myself a drink that night. Sat back, watched the city lights flicker beneath the dark sky. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about revelation. And I was going to show Caleb exactly who he'd tried to erase. I watched Caleb from a distance as his world continued to collapse. His once confident stride had turned jittery. The sharp suits felt like armor, but they didn't protect him from the onslaught he couldn't see coming. He started showing up, late to meetings, fumbling through presentations, losing his grip on even the simplest decisions. The board was growing restless, whispers of no confidence circling in hushed tones behind closed doors. The same people who once bowed to his charm now questioned his leadership with veiled contempt. I was the ghost they couldn't see, but I was closer than they thought. While Caleb scrambled to plug leaks and calm clients, I focused on something more powerful than information. I focused on control. My Northgate advisory wasn't just a consulting firm, it was a financial Trojan horse. Using silent partners and dummy corporations, I began quietly purchasing shares of Cross & Drake. No flashy moves, no headlines, just cold, calculated accumulation. Every share I bought was a nail in Caleb's coffin. It wasn't about making a quick profit, it was about gaining power, the kind Caleb never imagined I'd wield. Months passed. The share tally grew. 11% wasn't enough anymore. I was heading toward a controlling interest. Meanwhile, I dug deeper into the company charter, the legal framework Caleb had ignored in his arrogance. There, buried in the fine print, was a loophole so glaring it was almost laughable. It allowed a shareholder with enough stake to call for a special board meeting and initiate a vote of no confidence in the CEO. Caleb never fixed that clause. Never imagined it could be used against him. That's when I reached out to Vivian Drake. Yes, she was a force of nature. Our late father's former lawyer, the woman who had guided both Caleb and me through our first business contracts. Her reputation was pristine and unshakable. She'd always seen through Caleb's charm, warned me once not to underestimate the damage his recklessness could cause. Vivian answered my call on the third ring. I could hear the skepticism in her voice. "Julian," she said, "I thought you were done with all this family business." "I'm just getting started," I told her. I needed her sharp legal mind to weaponize the loophole, to prepare the groundwork for a boardroom coup. She didn't hesitate. Within days, she was combing through Cross and Drake's records, uncovering mismanagement, breaches of fiduciary duty, and most importantly, the company's vulnerabilities. Ones Caleb had left exposed. With Vivian on my side, I wasn't just a shareholder, I was a threat. The pieces were in place. I watched Caleb's paranoia deepen. His phone calls became frantic. He grilled his executives, demanding loyalty checks, orchestrating purges, but the rot was too deep. Rumors leaked about possible investigations into the company's financial dealings. Investors grew cold. At one board meeting, Caleb stood before, the director's voice raised, trying to convince them the crisis was temporary, a hiccup, but the room was empty. Eyes bored, faces stone cold. I sat across the city, knowing they were waiting for a signal, waiting for the right moment. That moment came when I filed the motion for a special shareholders meeting, backed by the shares I'd accumulated and Vivian's legal expertise. The notice shook the company like a thunderclap. Caleb's world exploded. He called me, voice trembling with rage and desperation. "What are you trying to do, Julian?" "Show you what leadership really looks like," I said. He accused me of betrayal, of greed, but I was neither. I was justice in slow motion. The day of the shareholders' meeting arrived. The tension was electric, palpable. I sat in the room, quiet and composed, as Vivian laid out the case. She detailed Caleb's failures, his reckless decisions, and the breach of trust. She presented the evidence, financial reports, leaked emails, client defections, all painted in stark, undeniable terms. Caleb tried to defend himself, but the cracks in his armor were too wide. The vote was unanimous. No confidence. He was removed. I was in. I looked across the room at Caleb, defeated, broken. But I didn't gloat, because this was only the beginning. I had reclaimed what was mine, not just a company, but the legacy our father had built, and I was going to rebuild it the right way, with respect, with integrity, and with the scars of betrayal fueling every step. As I took my seat at the head of the table, I knew Caleb would never forget this day, nor would anyone else. Because sometimes the quietest revenge is the most devastating. I stepped into my father's old office, now mine, and for a moment I let the silence sink in. The heavy oak desk, the tall windows that overlooked the city, the scent of leather and legacy. It was the same room Caleb once used to fire me. Now, I sat in the chair he thought he'd die in. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. That was never the point. This wasn't about power. It was about respect, redemption, and reclaiming the future. I got to work. The company was bleeding quietly. In corners no one dared to look. Department heads loyal to Caleb were siphoning funds, burying failures under cooked reports, and shielding each other with backroom pacts. I broke them all. Fired half the top brass in the first month, froze suspicious accounts, audited every deal signed in Caleb's reign. I called every major client personally, one by one, and asked them to trust me again. Some were skeptical, some were angry, but most had been waiting for this moment, for change, for stability, for leadership. Cross and Drake began to breathe again. Revenue climbed, morale returned, and for the first time in years, our father's name didn't feel like a shadow. It felt like a promise. But victory has a way of attracting ghosts. Caleb had disappeared after the vote. No press conference, no resignation letter, just silence. I assumed he'd fled to lick his wounds, hide his shame. I was wrong. The first headline dropped on a Monday morning: Julian Cross accused of insider trading. Complete fabrication. But the timing? Perfect. Then came the whispers, fake emails, doctored recordings, even a manipulated photo of me meeting with a competitor. It was sloppy work, but just good enough to cause a stir. Social media erupted. Investors hesitated. Journalists flooded my office with requests for comments. The board started sending concerned emails. Caleb was trying to win the war he lost in the only way he knew how, by burning everything down. But he forgot one thing. I didn't build my comeback on charm. I built it on proof. I called a press conference. No fancy PR stunts, no lawyers speaking for me, just me, a microphone, and a folder. I stood before the cameras and held up every document Caleb had faked, alongside the originals. Showed digital fingerprints tracing the leaks to an IP address linked to Caleb's last known residence. Showed timestamps, metadata, emails. Vivian Drake confirmed every detail publicly. Then I dropped the final blow. Security footage of Caleb meeting with the journalist who broke the story. It aired live. The silence in the room was deafening. Reporters lowered their mics. Phones buzzed with breaking news alerts. Within an hour, the board released a statement clearing my name and filing a defamation suit against Caleb. And just like that, his last attempt to destroy me backfired. He wasn't feared anymore. He wasn't admired. He was pathetic, and the world finally saw it. Weeks later, I stood at our annual shareholder meeting. All eyes on me, not with doubt, but with respect. I didn't speak about Caleb. I spoke about our future. About innovation, transparency, responsibility, about rebuilding trust in a name that once stood for something. I finished my speech with the words my father used to repeat to us as boys. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you fight to protect while you're still here. That night I walked out of the building alone. The city lights shimmered in the glass, and I finally felt light again. Revenge didn't make me feel powerful. Honor did. So if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever been dismissed, discarded, or underestimated, don't chase destruction. Build something better. Let success be the echo of everything they thought you couldn't become. And if you want more stories like this, true power plays, unforgettable revenge, and stories that hit deep, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's more where this came from. Until next time.